right, welcome back to Fight Talk, where we talk combat sports. My name is Austin Ullman, and today we've got the end of year UFC Awards. I've taken a little break. I am back, ready for the start of the year. We finally have a UFC Fight Night this weekend, and then obviously we're a week and a half out from UFC 311, the return of Islam Makhachev. We're finally going to get that great fight with Arman. But I wanted to get into the UFC Awards. It's one of the best times of the year. The new year comes along, and you get to reflect on the last year of combat sports, not just the UFC, but boxing. I'll have a boxing awards video coming out shortly after this one. And basically what this is an opportunity. Combat sports is different. Every other sport has some kind of off season. And combat sports is completely different. And what an off season allows you to do as a sports fan is, number one, miss the sport. Now, it's different in the UFC because we miss the sport for, a month at a time when we're talking about pay-per-views or whatever that looks like. But it really gives you an opportunity to reflect and look back and think about the moments of the past year. And the UFC doesn't really have that. Besides this month break that we have at the end of the year, we really do not have an off season. And in combat sports, we've had boxing fights this whole time, and it goes straight through. And so as we enter into the new year, it's a fun time to look back and remember all the great pay-per-views, remember all the great moments. Overall, as a year, and I think this is a general consensus among UFC fans, it was not the greatest year. There's been more entertaining years and exciting years. It was definitely a year to remember, a year that's different with obviously UFC 300 and UFC Noche. Some things we'll just never see again. Specifically the likes of UFC Noche. UFC 300 will be, we'll have UFC 400 and 500, and there will be great UFC events like that one. But that was the greatest UFC event of all time that we've seen, top to bottom card-wise. And UFC Noche was crazy. But with that, let's get right into the awards. Knockout of the year. The most fun one probably, right? The one that we all remember. There's some fantastic knockouts this year. And what I want to do with the awards is it's a combination. It's about 50-50 between the thing itself, so in this case the knockout, and then the magnitude, right, of when it took place, and those kind of things. So just looking ahead, like fighter of the year, right? I'm not going to give it to a guy who won 4 fights in dominant fashion over Alex Pereira because of the magnitude in which Alex Pereira did it. That's an obvious thing. So knockout of the year, there was probably better knockouts than this one, just from the standpoint of excitement and crazy power and things like that. But obviously, no knockout this year can top what Max Holloway did to Justin Gaethje at UFC 300. The moment there, first, the fact that Holloway was in that fight and dominating the fight was surprising to me, and I know a lot of other people. But then the fact that we get, it comes down to the final second, comes down to the final 10 seconds, and Max Holloway points to the center of the ring. That's the greatest UFC moment of all time. This isn't just a year-end award. This isn't just knockout of the year. It's the greatest knockout of all time, if you ask me. You can throw other names in there, but just pure the moment on the main card of one of the biggest cards of all time, and Max Holloway points to the center of the ring while he's up, easily winning the fight. Could have just ran away, ran around the side of the cage and done whatever. And he points to the center with an absolute killer and knocks him out with a second left. The feeling, the next, it took a while to sink in, but the next 15 seconds after that knockout, I'll never forget. I couldn't, and you guys felt like you couldn't contain your emotions. It was so crazy. You didn't even know what you just witnessed. So knockout of the year, it's so obvious for me. Fight of the year, same thing. There's an argument there always is, but that moment to me might never be topped in UFC history. When we have UFC 500 and UFC 1000 and whatever it is in the future, that's the video that's going to play. is Max Holloway knocking out Justin Gaethje. That is, up to this moment, the greatest UFC moment of all time. So, of course, I can give it knockout and fight of the year. I mean, it was a good fight. Max dominated. Justin Gaethje had a good fourth round. And he dropped Holloway in the fourth round. That was a fantastic fight. And just the fact that Holloway was going up a weight class, and the fact that Holloway, he's a great fighter. And he was dominating guys at 45, except for Volk. And you just kind of think, like, man, you look back at all those guys he was beating, and you really have some questions about him. Like, maybe those guys just weren't that good. And maybe the only quality fighter he's fought is Volk. And when he sees a quality guy like Justin Gaethje, it's just going to be a mess. And it wasn't a mess. Well, it was a mess, but it was a mess for Justin Gaethje. So that's my knockout and fighter of the year. Submission of the year, Khamzat Chimaev and Robert Whittaker. This was a fantastic fight. The X-rays or whatever the picture was of that DC had on the broadcast of Whittaker's teeth and jaw and whatever kind of a mess that was. That was incredible. And once again showed us the domination, the strength that Khamzat Chimaev possesses. Absolutely incredible. Honestly, this guy might get submission of the year for a lot of times going forward. Obviously, you had the Islam submission, but this was pure domination, pure strength and domination, and to do that to a guy like Robert Whittaker is unheard of. So, fighter of the year is Alex Pereira. Obviously, between him and Ilia, there's no one else in the conversation, and Ilia had a great year. Most years, Ilia wins fighter of the year. To beat an absolute legend like Volk and then an absolute legend like Max Holloway in dominating fashion, and to rise onto the scene like he has, and to just beat everybody the exact same. I mean, he was doing this to guys lower in the division, and it's like, yeah, when he gets to the top, it's probably going to be tougher. No. The same thing that he did to all the other guys that he's fought at the beginning of career, he did to Volk and Holloway. Fantastic year for that guy. But man, to step up, to save literally 3 events, to headline and produce a knockout on the biggest fight card we've ever seen. And then he's like, I'm going to take some time off. He actually wanted to fight at UFC 301 in Brazil. Then they're like, okay, McGregor's out. We need someone to step in. We need you to fight Yuri, an absolute killer who, yes, he beat, but there was moments where Yuri had moments in that fight. Just destroys him. I mean, Yuri never had a chance in that fight. And then he's like, okay, I got to take time off. I'll be back maybe in the winter, January something. He comes back again. UFC 307. Khalil Roundtree saves the day. Salt Lake City. Tougher, but listen. I mean, Khalil fought great for 1. And for 2, got hurt in training camp. Tough training camp. Short notice. Still knocked him out. So, no doubt. Fighter of the year. It was a good battle, and either guy, most years, in my opinion, wins it. And then obviously you've got Islam, who only fought once this year, is probably the other guy that's in the category. But he's going to get a jump start for next year, by the way. If you think about that, Islam, he's getting a fight in January now. If he can win that, he might be setting himself up to fight twice more, and he could be the guy that can get lucky and fight 3 times and win fighter of the year in 2025. How about the camp of the year? This one's obvious. The fighting nerds, obviously. Man, by the end of the year, you got Elon Musk, cage side, wearing the glasses. Come on, man. This is incredible what these guys have done. Flavio Alvaro, Pablo Supuri. Just incredible. Just incredible. Carlos Prates, Kai Baralho, Gene Silva, Mauricio Ruffi. These guys have dominated. They have so much fun. They've got the glasses. They've got the swagger. They've got it all. And at a time where things looked bleak for Brazil in a sense after UFC 301. I mean, not a great card, not a great crowd. This is a group of guys that could bring some juice back there, some serious juice back to Brazil. Cannot wait to see what they can do this next year. They're gonna win Camp of the Year for a lot of years in a row, in my opinion. I mean, this is something really special that they have going on. Carlos Prates is the top. I mean, he's the top. He went 4-0 this year, all knockouts. Gene Silva 3-0, 3 knockouts. Most recently against Drew Dober, that crazy knockout in July, right? Kai Baralho, Mauricio Rufy, both went 2-0. Rufy's last fight this year was a little closer, just ran out of stamina a bit at the end there, but obviously Baralho had a fantastic year, fought on that UFC 301 main card. So that's their top 4 fighters, and they went 11-0, and in dominating fashion. So, and then obviously Baralho with the win against Jared Cannonier late in the year. So, fantastic stuff from the gym in Sao Paulo. It's going to be, I mean, the question is, but between those 4 guys, who's going to be the first to lose? We'll find out. Breakout fighter. We'll stick with the nerds. You got Carlos Prates, 4 TKO wins this year. This is pretty unanimous. Everyone agrees with this one. His last one was a TKO win over Neil Magny. And, I mean, yeah, it's just clear. Everyone else that's younger was kind of already on the scene, and this guy just was not that known, was not on the scene in 4 TKO victories this year. So fantastic year for him. Most improved fighter this year. This one might get some slack. This will be interesting. I said Alex Pereira. And let me tell you why. There's some good arguments. A lot of people said Dan Hooker. I just had a hard time getting behind that. The guy fought once this year. He looked good. I still don't think he's a contender, dare I say. I mean, that's a fantastic division. I don't think he's a contender yet. And, I mean, it was a tough one. There was no obvious answer this year. A lot of people saying Dan Hooker. I said Alex Pereira, and here's why. This guy went up to 205, and people forget this. He could have very easily lost that Jan Blachowicz fight on the scorecards. He won 2-1, but he could have very easily lost that. And then he fights Yuri, and everyone celebrates. It's a great knockout. But he still didn't have that dominating light heavyweight presence yet, the one that he has now. He didn't have that yet. Why didn't he have that? Because he had barely beat Jan, and Yuri had some moments, and Yuri hit him, and it was a good fight. And then he comes out this year. Jamal Hill brutally knocks him out. Yuri Prochazka would have knocked him out in the first round if he had like 10 more seconds, but early second round head kick, gone. And then we get Khalil Roundtree, and Khalil Roundtree puts up a better fight. But now we have this dominating Alex Pereira. I mean, we went from a guy who had just gotten knocked out in his last fight at 185. He goes up to 205. First fight close, really close, against a contender, not a champion. Second fight, great fight, knockout. But Yuri had his moments. And then he turned into a superstar, an absolute dominator, the likes of which in this sport you can only compare at this moment to a guy like Tom Aspinall and Ilia Topuria. The difference is with Tom Aspinall, we saw it coming up the whole time. With Ilia Topuria, we saw it coming up the whole time. We always knew Alex Pereira was good. Don't get me wrong. He was the champion at 185. He beat Izzy. I understand. But to go from a really good fighter to an all-time great, that's my most improved fighter this year. Pay-per-view of the year, UFC 300. I mean, you could say 306 just with all the crazy things that happens. Something totally different than we've ever seen. But just the card itself, I mean, UFC 300 is unlike anything we've ever seen. I mean, Cody Garbrandt and Figgy to start the night off. That's absolutely fantastic. Let's just review the card real quick. UFC 300. I mean, Figgy and Garbrandt, Bobby Green, Jim Miller, Moicano Turner, Diego Lopez, Sadiq Youssef, Kaylee Harrison dominates Holly Holm, Sterling Cater, bad fight. And then we're still the prelims, and Yuri Prochazka gets a TKO. Yeah, the guy who a couple months later fought Pereira for the belt. He was on the prelims. Bo Nickel, submission. That Arman Charles fight, fantastic fight. That was the forgotten fight of that night. And then obviously the great Holloway Gaethje fight, Zhang Weili dominates, and then Alex Pereira dominates. So, obviously. An interesting situation there, obviously, with the stakes being set here, and then it felt like it was going to be here, but at the end of the day, can't argue with that. Worst pay-per-view of the year, I'm going to say UFC 300, or 303, sorry, not 300, 303. You had the Dan Ige situation, and just not a great card. I mean, Pereira really saved it at the end. The Lopez and Ige fight was not that great, and the rest of the fights were just the Anthony Smith fight was just absolutely atrocious to watch. So that was tough. And there was a few. I looked through 304 wasn't great, but you had the Aspinall finish and the Paddy Pimblett finish, and there was some other. 305 wasn't fantastic, so you could go through. Overall, when it comes to like worst card fighting wise or fighters wise, you had UFC 301, but that card actually delivered with some exciting fights. So that one kind of depends on where you're putting your marbles. Rivalry of the year, I said absolutely nothing. There was no rivalry. That's something that hopefully we can get back this year. I mean, you could say McGregor Chandler, you could say Aspinall Jones, but I didn't feel comfortable giving the award. They weren't good enough for me to give the award to anyone, so I said nobody. Comeback fighter of the year, John Jones. Took a year off. I mean, I talk about the dominance of Topuria and Pereira and those people. John Jones is still dominant. He showed that. Just the ground and pound against Stipe and that spinning back kick. Just fantastic stuff from him. Promoter of the year, Renato Moicano. Renato Moicano, obviously, just fantastic on the mic. I mean, after 300, just so good and had some big wins this year. So looking forward to seeing what he can continue to do in the octagon and also on the mic. Press conference moment of the year was Ronaldo Rodriguez and Ode Osbourne. That UFC 306 press conferences that was outside in the parking lot outside of the Sphere. Those two, I mean, just stood up and just absolutely went at it for so long. So some fantastic trash talking there. Crowd of the year, St. Louis for me. It was a fight night. I said it all year on this podcast. It was fantastic. A lot of hometown guys on it. And that should be the bar for fight nights. They said it. They were fantastic. And they had some fun fights too. They had Derek Lewis and Buckley and so on. Olberg was on that card. Photo of the year, obviously Alex Pereira over Jamal Hill. Fantastic. Nothing beats that photo. Actually had two great photos. You have the photo too of him shoving off Herb Dean like 5 seconds before. So fantastic job by Pereira there. And then you could even do one of the photos of him shooting the arrow. Just a lot of great photos of Alex Pereira at UFC 300. Best moment, Holloway Gaethje, without a doubt. Saddest moment, Volk getting KO'd, man. That was tough. That was tough to see. And now he's just taking a lot of time off, which is good. Smart decision from him. But obviously we had the head kick, and then we had Ilia, and it kind of felt like it was going to go that way. It felt like Ilia was the young dominator that was finally going to get him, and he got him, and that was sad. And then underrated performance of the year, this is my final one, Sean O'Malley versus Chito Vera. Obviously, the loss to Merab takes a little of the aura away from Sean O'Malley. But what he did against Chito Vera, I mean, that should have been a knockout, y'all. The sound of that knee to the face from Sean O'Malley, that should have been a knockout. Everybody knows it. But Chito was just one tough son of a gun that night. But Sean O'Malley put on a great performance that night. That's underrated, one that a lot of people forget. And that is it. That's my UFC 2024 awards. Alex Pereira, Max Holloway taking home quite a few of them. Again, a different year in the UFC. some moments we'll never forget, and then a lot of fights that we will forget in the coming years. So hopefully a more exciting 2025. I think they said 2024 was the least amount of knockouts we've ever seen in the UFC. Obviously, part of that's due to the gloves that we used for a while, and the gloves are done now. So we'll see what they have for 2025. But that is all I've got for now. I am Austin Ullman. Thank you for tuning in to Fight Talk.